Check, check. Can you guys hear me?
I think it's just you and me so far.
No, we have a third person, Stephen Keeley.
Who do we?
Yeah.
Only showing 2 people. Oh, here we go. Hi, Stephen Keeley.
He's on mute. I think you're on mute, Stephen.
Yes, sorry.
Yeah, no worries. We just have you been on the call before?
Nope, this is my first time joining the call.
Oh, nice. How did you come about to hearing about NRE Labs?
I'm, let's see. So I discovered NRE Labs just over a year ago, I believe. Timings, I don't exactly remember. But lately I've taken an interest into getting it running under Windows and creating content, some of the content that I want to create for my company for training. I liked what NRE Labs provides for the side-by-side training, where you can read the documentation as well as type commands at the same time.
So are you primarily using the platform then for internal lessons or?
I'm running into issues running the platform locally. So right now it's just looking at getting it to run in Windows and trying to assist with the community and setting up I just want to be more involved in the community.
Oh, sweet. We'll definitely help you get Self-Medicate up and running inside of Windows. I mean, I need to get a Windows box now, I guess. I don't have one.
Well, I don't want to take up any time, but talking with Matt Oswalt on the NRE community, I noticed, so y'all want to move to using a Vagrant file and the option of running NRE Labs without a VM image inside of Self-Medicate. So using Minikube with a driver of none. So I was playing around with it the last 2 days, and it's a lot more complicated than I initially thought.
Yeah, that's why we kind of want to set it up with Minikube in a VM with driver equals none with Vagrant, so you can just Vagrant up and it just works. Like it's pre-configured to do the right stuff.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
So I was hoping to be able to provide a pull request with that, but some of it is getting outside of my knowledge of Minikube and Kubernetes. So.
Okay. Well, sweet. Thank you for joining the call.
You're welcome.
Let's see, and I think I saw both Drew and Ethan.
Hello, hello.
Hello, hello. And am I missing anybody? So Drew, Ethan, Steve, Matt, Derek, and Lisa. Is that where we are right now?
That is where we're at.
Okay. All right, so we had dedicated this meeting to going through the 2 governance docs that we have drafted so far. We have put them on GitHub for comment, so anybody can go and comment on them. But sometimes it's easier just to kind of go through it live together and talk through it. So I will start, I think, let me share my screen. If I can figure out how to share my screen. We'll start with the code of conduct because that's relatively short, and this is largely based on the Covenant Code of Conduct. So if you've worked in other open source projects, this should be extremely familiar. I'll just point out the main differences that we've added. The first, of course, is that this is an education-focused project, and so perhaps more than any other open source project, we believe in mentoring. That includes mentoring members of our community. The other addition is we have selected English as the default language of project operations, and mainly because it's the common code of interoperability for international operations, and as such, we expect that there will be regional variations in how people speak and how people write, accents, and so forth and so on. And we expect people to be respectful of that, and we also encourage internationalization of the project, most particularly of the lessons. Let's see. Responsibilities scope are the same as the standard Covenant code. Conflict resolution, right now we have the reporting going to the steering committee, and we'll talk about that a little bit in the governance doc. So for example, if you're having trouble with another member of the community or someone who is a project lead or whomever, you can reach out to the steering committee. This email address does need to be updated. And if you are uncomfortable going to the steering committee as a group, you can reach the steering committee director. And once that person is elected, we'll have their email address and all of the other steering committee people's email addresses, in addition to the group email address, available on the NRE Labs website. I think Pete had commented verbally to us, but had not commented in the document. Mainly, he was just asking sort of what the reporting exercise should be, and that would be the flow that we had recommended. Any thoughts or comments on any of this? All right. I didn't think that would be particularly controversial, but
no, I mean, Lisa, you've got all the experience with this anyway with your background, so.
Well, that doesn't mean that I'm always right. So it has been known to happen that I am not always right. All right. Governance doc. Mission and scope. Again, our mission is to help foster the adoption of network reliability engineering and automation. Obviously, the platform can be used for a variety of other types of training and so forth, as Stephen was just alluding to. When we talk about the scope, and we'll get to this a little bit later, we want to make sure that, obviously, since it's open source and the code is open source, anybody can grab the code and go do whatever they want with it. But in terms of what the community as a group needs to be focused on, we kind of all need to agree on, does the exercise of the group further the mission of the project? So to that end, we will also need to sort of create a set of criteria for what that would be. So when it comes to platform contributions, committers will determine if a contribution is core, meaning that it clearly is aligned with the roadmap that the community has agreed upon and with the mission, the stated mission of the project. If it's marked as experimental, that might be a little bit more fuzzy, less clear, and therefore lower priority in terms of development and testing and commitment. Similarly for lessons, obviously anybody can write a lesson, they can host it privately, they can do whatever they want with it. In order for it to be hosted on the NRE Labs site, again, it would need to meet sort of the criteria that we'll need to develop and spell out to make sure that it's aligned with the mission of the project. Any thoughts? Seems reasonable. Anything missing, like the what about or what if kinds of cases that maybe this hasn't particularly addressed? All right, I will go on. The technical community, which is everybody on this call, is responsible for all the technical doings of the project. That includes the architecture, anything relating to achieving the mission and scope of the project, anything relating to the platform itself, as well as the lessons. This is a reiteration also that there is a documented contribution process. We will need to develop an inbound code review policy that has all of the, I always blank on the term. There is basically a very sort of lightweight process that code committers or contributors will include with their contributions that basically says, yea, verily, I'm legally allowed to give you to contribute this code, right? I'm not taking proprietary code and contributing it to anybody else. It doesn't belong to anybody else. It is free and clear, and I can contribute it to the project. So we need to develop an inbound code review policy that includes that language, but that's sort of a to-do, and we are acknowledging here that that's something that we need to do as a community. We may also need to work with other open source and open standards communities. The technical community is also responsible for establishing and enforcing community norms and workflows and releases, and also security issues, and developing policies for reporting them. Technical participation is open to anyone, so long as they behave themselves. There are sub-projects within NRE Labs. They're all listed separately in GitHub, Antidote, and various other projects. Each project, ideally, and obviously we'll need to grow our community a little bit to achieve this, but ideally each project would have 2 committers, so that no one has sole power of acceptance or rejection of code. Not that, again, we're not particularly expecting this to be a highly political or politicized project. Some are definitely more than others. But, people are people, and sometimes people get on ego trips or, have falling outs or whatever. And so having two committers is just good standard practice. A contributor may become a committer with the majority approval of existing committers, and may be removed by majority approval of other existing committers. Project contributors may request the removal of a committer by notifying the steering committee, or the committer can resign for their own reasons. So if we have a committer who either is abusing people, or much more likely is simply just not present on a regular basis and therefore not reviewing and committing code in a timely fashion, and is becoming a roadblock to progress, that might be a reason to request the removal of a committer. Questions on this so far? Okay.
No questions for me.
Okay. Something I've seen in some projects is sometimes there's a developer advocate who is on a steering committee in addition to the technical community lead. That typically happens in very large projects, especially projects where most of the steering committee or governing board or what have you is kind of made up of non-technical people. In this case, that's sort of not the composition of our community, nor of our steering committee. But we did want to make sure that there was plenty of visibility of the technical community, of the doings of the steering committee. The steering committee meetings will, by default, all be open and recorded, but it may occasionally be useful to hear from not just the technical community leader, but individual project leads who might be closest to what's going on in a particular project. And so we've recommended that the sub-projects will also nominate, from among their committers, will nominate a lead who will attend the steering committee on a non-voting basis. We've also said that the technical community can create other roles if it wishes. Should be fairly straightforward there. Technical committee will require an overall leader. We've said that initially the project's technical founder, i.e. Matt, will be the technical community leader by default for a year so that we can all suck everything he knows about the project out of his head and socialize it to the community as a whole. And thereafter, technical community leaders will either be nominated or self-nominated from existing committers. In order to vote on the community leader, you need to have made documented contributions, and those can be either code or non-code contributions in the previous 12 months. Any angst there? Okay. We've also talked about the idea of creating a curriculum lead role, and this might in some sense be sort of the developer evangelist kind of role, in the sense that the curriculum lead is not just the person who's writing the lessons, but is responsible as much as anything else for finding other people who are interested in contributing lessons and helping them get onboarded, learn the contribution process, know and adhere to the code review policy, track the status of curriculum lessons in progress, prioritize them, make sure that they're aligned with the mission of the project, and make sure that they're happening on a regular basis. So does that seem like a useful position? Is that overkill? Deep silence.
Poor Lisa. You're talking to a bunch of nerds about governance, Lisa.
But people, I will tell you that lots and lots of developers have very strong feelings about all this stuff.
Yeah, I mean the general, the theme here seems to be kind of decentralization of power and control, making it a bit more democratized and meritocratized in a way that you can sustain the project going forward. And that seems to be the theme that I'm picking up.
Absolutely. Absolutely. As we've said from the very beginning, we are very actively interested in getting out of the business of running the project and handing it off to the bigger, broader world.
I like that general theme. It's just, it's hard to have an opinion on some of the subpoints because I haven't been here before, so I don't have specific.
So you don't have the battle scars that make you go, oh, you really ought to put this point.
That's right. That's right.
I do have some of those scars, and so does Matt, and so does Derek. I also, I don't know if you know her, Vicki Bresser is in our open source office, and she's worked in open source for 30 years, and she's also provided input on this as well, based on her extensive experience in multiple open source projects all up and down the stack. All right, so steering committee, this is sometimes the most contentious. Steering committee basically does administration and administrative oversight. So budget, paying the bills, legal stuff, marketing, anything non-technical. The expectation really is that the steering committee will help set strategic direction for the project with the input of the technical community. But for all technical matters, the steering committee is really in a support role in terms of finding funding for things, marketing the doings of and achievements of the technical community and so on. Steering committee is there to help kind of steer through any contentious issues. Again, by preference in a sort of advisory in a capacity, or as the role being more mediation than what I want to say, executive decision making. And as such, again, it's intended to be decentralized. There is a director. The role of the director is not a glamorous one. It's the person who will most go through all of make sure that the project runs on a day-to-day basis. But we'll go through that in a second. So we're saying originally we had the director, the treasurer, and the technical community leader, and then we added the curriculum lead, and then we said, well, that's 4, and there really should be an odd number, and so then we also added a marketing lead. It may take us a while to actually find 5 people to fill us all out, but an absolute minimum, we should have these 3. Yeah. We said that the committee can choose to add additional members, such as a user community representative on either a voting or non-voting basis, using the voting procedures that we'll get to in a minute. A user community rep is a good practice. Of course, we don't actually track our users, which will make that something of a challenge, but we may eventually have users who self-identify. And so we kind of wanted to sort of note that as a possibility while leaving that as a future option as opposed to a requirement. So technical community voters, which would be everybody who's made contributions that have been accepted in the last 12 months, will elect a director by private vote. And if there are multiple candidates for director, then it's whoever gets the largest share of the vote. Directors do not need to have made technical contribution, but are expected to have demonstrated consistent support for the project in either a technical or non-technical capacity. So that's inherently a bit fuzzy, and sometimes people kind of get uncomfortable with things being not spelled out with great exactitude. But the vast majority of the director's responsibilities are things that are hard to measure. And so I don't know of any other way to make it less squishy. So what the director has to do is organize and lead steering committee meetings, work with the committee to develop an operating plan and budget, make sure that you're executing to that plan and budget, Make sure people get paid on a timely basis, according to the budget, not making random expenditures that nobody else has agreed upon. Lead sponsor recruitment, and this is actually something that genuinely takes some time, although other committee members and also technical committee members are absolutely asked and requested to help with that. The director will kind of do all the final paperwork and so forth, but obviously we hope that the rest of the community will help with bringing in sponsors as well. And the steering committee director should also be regularly attending technical community meetings so that they know what's going on in the project and working closely with the technical community leader. The treasurer is basically there to be a second set of eyes on the money and make sure that it's all being spent appropriately, and that the director isn't funding their retirement or vacations in Tahiti. The marketing lead does marketing things, and I'm noticing that there should be a C here in metrics. Reporting on marketing type things, working on launches for major releases and any other major events that we might choose to do in the future. Working with the community manager whose role hasn't been specifically defined in the governance doc because it's just kind of, it's day-to-day operations and not relating to power and control particularly. The technical community leader and the curriculum lead are roles that we've already talked about. And we've also said the committee can formalize additional roles if desired. Questions or comments on any of that? Okay. So who gets to vote and how? So we have up to 5 steering committee members, 5 steering committee votes. We may have additional voters and members if the existing steering committee agrees that there should be such a role. We've also said that if a steering committee voter misses 3 meetings in a row without designating a proxy, their voting capacity will be suspended until they've sort of rejoined the flow of things. Partly that's to help ensure that the voters, take their responsibilities as a steering committee member seriously, and are au courant and informed of what's happening in the community, and can make informed decisions. If the steering committee voter misses 4 or more meetings in a row with or without a proxy, and before we get to 4, we'll obviously want to talk with them and make sure that this is really the role they want to be fulfilling. But if they miss 4 or more in a row, then we may remove that individual and replace them with someone who's more readily available. Any thoughts or comments on that? Okay. Elections and any other voting decisions require a quorum of at least 50% of the voting members. Voting can be held during committee meetings or by electronic means, i.e. email or polling tool, within a specified time period. Amendments to this or policy documents require a majority vote, and that probably should say of the steering committee. Contributors will comply with all the policies, which may include a contributor license agreement, a code of conduct privacy policy, which we will need to write, terms of use, and trademark and branding policy. And I'll comment on that just for a moment here. In parallel with all of this, we've been exploring moving the project to a conservatorship or foundation of some sort, mainly so that first order, so that again, Juniper gets out of the business of running the project, and more specifically as we bring on other sponsoring organizations so that we have a neutral place to put money, which is really what it comes down to. So whenever that happens, in pretty much all cases, conservancies and foundations generally have their own trademark and branding policies. We can either, follow their standard template, or we can write one using their standard template. And so that will be, that's something that we'll need to write. Any questions on that?
Lisa, one thing, not a question on that. You've been highlighting over those lines. I don't know if you noticed those the blue button that pops up whenever you hover over line. Yeah. If you click that, that's how you can add a comment. I know you had a to-do that you thought of in one of the previous lines. So you can do that to take a quick note saying like this, add the phraseology that you wanted. But also a general comment to everybody. This is how you can leave comments on the doc. So this is a pull request in GitHub, and you can just click any one of those lines in that blue box to leave a comment. And as we make changes, if we change the line that you commented on, then your comment will automatically get dismissed. So that is the primary way of asynchronous feedback.
Right. So just as I was just talking about, currently title to all the trade and service marks is held by Juniper Networks, although in fact we haven't actually registered them with trademark bodies. In the likely event that the project joins a foundation or conservancies, trademarks shall be transferred to that entity, and we'll follow that trademark policy. The project already does own all of the repositories, the social media accounts, any domain names that we might create, so forth and so on. Those are all owned by the project itself. The platform is licensed under Apache 2.0. Currently the lessons are as well, but I'm working to get that changed to Creative Commons. All the other content is also published under Creative Commons. And then finally, we may also, in the course of doing development, because software development worldwide, proprietary or open source, all is composed 90% of other bits and pieces of other open source projects. We may have reasons to contribute to other open source projects, which would be known as upstream projects, in order to fulfill some need with our own development. And so we're saying, yea, verily, we'll behave ourselves in making those upstream contributions as well. So ta-da, that is the governance doc that we have put forward for the community as a whole to look at. We should probably at some point allow some further time for review and comment by the community at large, and then in a future community meeting, either vote to ratify it or not. So 2 weeks hence, 3 weeks hence, something like that. So Ethan and Drew in particular, since I know we've been talking with you guys about coming into the project kind of more as a partner or sponsoring org. Are you comfortable with this? Does it kind of meet with what you would hope to see in terms of how the project would be run? Anything that we may have missed?
Again, going back to my earlier comment, Lisa, I don't have background in open source governance. I have no history here, so there's nothing standing out to me. I think something like this goes, if there are any lingering questions people might have in their minds about, oh, it's a Juniper thing versus, a true open source project that should be dispelled by this. So I think that's pretty significant.
Great. Excellent. Okay. All right. Then in that case, what do we think? Like 2 weeks from now? Is that sufficient time, do you think, for the rest of the world to kind of go through this and review it, and we can come back in 2 weeks and say yay or nay?
To find the rest of the world?
Well, anybody else out there in the world who may wish to participate, okay. And certainly our everybody who's registered on the community site.
Yeah, I just thinking, because I was just trying to recruit some people to do record some content. A lot of people are on vacation right at this time of year. So is 2 weeks enough in that context? Yeah.
So what, maybe end of August?
Yeah, most of the kids are back in school at that point. So maybe.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So we'll plan for end of August. I'll have to look at the calendar for which community meeting exactly, but we'll plan for end of August. All right. So that ends the stuff that I wanted to talk about today. Drew or Ethan, do you have any thoughts or comments? I know we were talking about releasing a bunch of stuff next week, and you had some stuff in the pipeline relating to upcoming curriculum. Do you have any questions or comments or anything we should discuss while we're here?
Well, as far as stuff that's ready to be released, I'm not up on where we're actually at with any of that. But if there's stuff that's ready to go, we can certainly coordinate on some evangelization. Yeah.
So Drew, I think, has been working on this a bit.
Yeah, I'm going to post a blog by this Thursday on a walkthrough of the Bash lessons that are currently available.
Okay.
And that's still on track.
Okay, awesome.
And last week, I think it was last week, we published a Datanauts episode where Matt spoke with Chris Wall about NRE labs.
Yeah, we suddenly saw number of lessons doubled last week.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
The system works.
It works. How about that?
Yeah, that's good.
If you're going to publish something Thursday, that probably means I owe you a link because we don't have it published on our prod site. So hopefully we'll be all deployed by then. I'm hoping to be. I don't see why we wouldn't be because we're pretty close right now. I'm actually about to start doing the release processes myself. If I run into any issues with that, I'll let you know. But I imagine you'll want to link to the Bash lesson in our production site by then. So if you don't get that from me by like Wednesday, I don't know, quitting time-ish, please pester me.
Okay, so
Wednesday morning.
Yeah, and to be honest, and we know what and to be honest, we know what it's going to be anyway. So I don't need to like figure it out. We can send it to you, and that's fine.
Okay, so does that mean the Bash lessons aren't currently in production?
Not currently in production. No, we're going through that release process like literally now. Like that's literally happening now.
Okay, should we don't need to put your release process around me writing a blog, so if you need more time, then that's fine. I can write it at another time.
Well, on the last stand-up, I thought we mentioned the 12th, so that's what sort of all the planning was going around. I as usual, I expect and try to have things done well before that, so that's why I'm saying like it's not impossible to meet Thursday, but what I was planning on was the excuse me, brain fart. Yeah, thank you. Sorry, brain fart.
I'll be out on the 12th, but I can do it the following week. Then I don't necessarily need to rush you.
Okay, well, we'll see where we're at. Like I said, we always like to try to operate as ahead as possible. So I'll let you know if we run into any issues, and yeah, if we need to, we can push it out a little bit. But no matter what, the Bash lesson we still plan to be available on the 12th. That is the current plan.
Sounds good.
We'll just flex when we write the blog about it.
Okay.
All right. Anything else that we want to talk about today? I know I had pretty much claimed the agenda for governance. Exciting as it is, but. All right. Well, we can probably give everybody 20 minutes back then.
All right.
Cool. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks all.
Bye.
Bye-bye.